The planet Velkar Prime was a world covered in red dust and broken metal. Once it had been full of life, but years of battles had turned it into a wasteland. The sky stayed orange even at night, and the air carried the smell of old fire. The planet now served as a testing ground for the Zerath Dominion, a proud alien empire that ruled over dozens of star systems. They were tall, armored beings with glowing armor suits that could stop bullets and plasma alike. To them, humans were nothing more than a small and curious species from a distant blue world. Among the prisoners the Zerath had captured was a man named Rian. He had been an engineer before the war. His hands were built for machines, not for weapons, but war had changed many people. Now Rian worked as both soldier and inventor. He had survived by using his mind more than his muscles. His team had been taken during an ambush near the mining colony of Titan Reach, and he was brought here for study and humiliation. The Zerath soldiers often gathered to mock the human prisoners. They enjoyed watching their commander, Talra, show off her strength. Talra was known across the Dominion as one of their finest warriors. Her armor was built with layered crystal plating that reflected light like fire, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been defeated. One morning, the prisoners were lined up in the courtyard of a ruined fortress. The ground was cracked from old impacts, and pieces of burned ships were scattered around. Talra stood on a metal platform as her soldiers formed a circle around the humans. She wanted to test a new weapon design her empire had developed. But when her eyes landed on Ryan, she paused. He was holding something small in his hands, made of steel and wire. It looked like a short blade not longer than his arm. The surface was dull, with no glow or shine. "What is that, human?" Talra asked, her voice echoing through her helmet. Ryan lifted his head. "It is my weapon," he said simply. The Zerath soldiers laughed. Their armor clanked as they hit their chests in amusement. To them, the little tool in his hand looked like a child's toy. One of the soldiers said that even a weak pulse from their armor could melt that piece of junk. Talra stepped closer, looking down at Ryan. "You call that a weapon?" she said. "It looks like scrap metal glued together. Is this what your species fights with?" Ryan did not answer. His face stayed calm, his eyes steady. He had heard this kind of talk before. Many races thought humans were weak because they did not have great strength or advanced technology. But Ryan knew something they did not. He had built the blade himself using parts taken from broken drones and energy cells. It was a magnetic edge weapon that worked on focused vibration. It did not shine or make noise because every pulse was contained inside the metal itself. The power of the blade came not from its look but from its precision. It needed to strike exactly at the right point to break through armor. Talra turned to her soldiers and said, "I could crush him with one hand. His tool would not even scratch my boot." Her words drew another wave of laughter. Some of the humans lowered their heads, ashamed or afraid. But Ryan stayed still. He was not angry. He had expected this. One of the younger Zerath soldiers whispered to Talra, "Let him prove it, Commander. Let the human show what his little stick can do." Talra liked that idea. She wanted to humiliate the humans even more. So she ordered her guards to clear a space in the middle of the courtyard. The alien crowd formed a circle. The wind carried sand and dust around them, and the sound of heavy armor filled the air. Rian was brought forward. His wrists were freed, and a Zerath officer handed him his weapon. Talra walked to the center of the ring, her armor glowing faintly as the energy shield came alive. She looked down at Ryan and said, "If you can hit me once, I will let you go free. But if you fail, you will work in the mines until the day your bones turn to dust." Rian's heart beat faster, but he showed no fear. He had always believed that a true engineer could solve any problem if given a chance. This was his chance. The crowd cheered as the duel began. Talra raised her plasma axe, a massive weapon that roared with light. She moved forward slowly, confident that the human could do nothing to her. Every step she took made the ground shake. Ryan stayed low, moving in small circles, watching her carefully. He noticed how her armor plates shifted as she walked, how the energy shield shimmered when her weapon moved. She swung the axe toward him, and he jumped aside. The blade hit the ground and melted the sand into glass. The Zerath soldiers cheered again. Talra laughed and said, "You run well for a creature so small." Ryan did not respond. He watched. Every movement she made gave him information. The hum of her armor told him how the power flowed through it. The faint light near her chest plate pulsed each time she lifted her weapon. He started to understand the rhythm of her shield. Talra attacked again, faster this time. Ryan blocked the strike with his small blade, and for a moment a spark jumped between the two weapons. His arm shook, but he held firm. The soldiers laughed again, but their laughter was weaker now. They had seen the spark. That was not supposed to happen, Talra frowned. Interesting, she said. You have tricks, little human. But they will not save you. She swung again, and again he dodged. Each time Rian learned more. He was waiting for a moment. The one chance when her shield would open for a fraction of a second. His weapon did not have the power to cut through armor by itself. It worked by sending a pulse through a weak point. The crowd started to grow restless. They wanted to see an easy win, but this small human was lasting longer than expected. Talra grew angry. Her movements became faster, heavier. She wanted to end it quickly. She slammed her axe down, and the impact threw sand into the air. Ryan stumbled but stayed on his feet. His blade was shaking, the edge glowing faintly now from the charge building inside. He saw it then, a tiny flash near the left shoulder joint of her armor. A flicker in the shield that lasted less than a heartbeat. That was the weak point. He stored the image in his mind. Talra took a deep breath and said, "This game is over." She rushed forward, her massive figure blocking the sun. The air vibrated from the power of her armor. Ryan prepared himself, his grip firm on the handle. He bent his knees slightly, ready to move. The soldiers shouted encouragement to their commander, but their voices sounded distant to Rian. He heard only the rhythm of his heartbeat and the quiet hum of his weapon. When Talra swung her axe again, Ryan ducked under the strike and rolled to the side. Dust filled the air. The Zareth soldiers laughed again, thinking he was running away. But Rian was not running. He was adjusting his angle. He stood up behind her, only a few steps away. She turned, raising her arm to strike again. That was when he saw the same flicker near her chest plate, the weak spot returning for a brief moment as her armor shifted. He knew that was the point he had to hit, but he did not move yet. He waited. The weapon needed a few more seconds to reach full charge. Talra raised her axe above her head. Her voice echoed, filled with pride. "This is how humans fall," she said. Ryan's eyes stayed on that glowing joint. His weapon pulsed once in his hand, ready. He whispered quietly, "No, this is how we learn." The two figures stood facing each other, one glowing like fire, the other small and silent. The dust swirled between them. The Zareth soldiers leaned forward, eager to see the end. At that moment, Ryan felt something shift inside him. He no longer cared about winning or losing. He only cared about showing what humans could do, how even the smallest tool, when made with thought and patience, could stand against any force. Talra charged one final time, and Ryan lowered his stance. The blade in his hand buzzed softly. The next move would decide everything. The air around the arena turned heavy as Talra's energy shield burned brighter. Sparks danced over the curved surface of her armor. She was angry now. The small human had lasted far longer than she expected. Every warrior in the Zareth Dominion knew her as the strongest of her kind, and the idea of being delayed by a single human was insulting to her pride. The circle of soldiers around them stayed silent. They wanted to cheer, but even they could sense that something had changed. The fight no longer looked like a simple show of power. It had become something else. Rian stood at the edge of the circle, breathing slowly. The blade in his hand hummed quietly. Dust clung to his clothes and his hair, but his eyes were sharp. He had already found the weak spot in Talra's armor. Now he only needed one perfect moment. Talra moved first. Her steps were slow at first, but each one carried great weight. The ground cracked beneath her boots. Her plasma axe glowed with a deep red light as she lifted it again. The sound of the weapon filled the entire courtyard. "You have skill," she said, her voice loud and cold through her helmet. "But skill is nothing without strength." Ryan did not reply. He only raised his weapon slightly, keeping his eyes on her shoulder joint, the point where the shield flickered before. The Zareth soldiers began to whisper among themselves. Some of them respected the human's calmness. Others thought he was only delaying his defeat. None of them could imagine that the man with the small, dull blade might actually win. When Talra swung her axe again, Ryan stepped aside and struck quickly toward her leg. The hit made a faint metallic sound, but it did not cut through. The armor held strong. Talra laughed as the blow bounced away. "You see," she said, "your toy cannot even leave a mark." But Rian was not disappointed. That strike had not been meant to harm her. It was a test. He watched the reaction of her armor and the pattern of light on the shield when his weapon made contact. Each test gave him more data, more understanding. Talra came at him again, swinging in wide arcs. Her movements were powerful but not careful. She was used to ending fights in seconds. Ryan kept moving back, letting her energy burn. The longer the fight went, the more heat built inside her armor. He noticed the slight lag between her movements and the glow of the power cells near her shoulders. It was small, but it was there. Ryan's body ached. Every near miss shook his bones. Each blast of heat from her weapon made his skin sting, but he stayed focused. He had built machines that worked under pressure far greater than this. He only needed one clear window of time to act. A sudden strike came from above. Talra slammed her axe down and the ground split open. Dust flew up in a thick cloud covering the arena. For a few seconds, neither of them could see clearly. Ryan used that chance to back away and crouch low. His mind was running through every detail he had seen. He remembered the sound her armor made when it was fully charged, a deep, smooth hum. But during the last swing, that sound had cracked for a brief instant. That meant the energy core inside her chest plate was overworking. It was a risk he could use. As the dust began to clear, Talra shouted, "Come out, little human. Do not hide from your end." Ryan stood again. His clothes were torn and his arm bled from a shallow cut, but he looked steady. He raised his weapon. The faint blue light at the edge flickered once and then steadied. "I am not hiding," he said calmly. "I am waiting." The Zerath soldiers laughed again, but some of them stopped when they saw Talra's armor glowing unevenly. Her own power was fighting against her. Talra charged forward. Her movements were faster than before, but less balanced. She swung again and again, forcing Ryan to dodge, to roll, to duck under heavy strikes. Each time, the shock waves from her blows threw sand into the air. His body screamed in pain, but his mind stayed cold. Finally, she swung too wide. Her balance slipped for half a second. Ryan saw his opening. He dashed forward and swung his magnetic blade toward the weak spot under her arm. The blade hit the shield, and for a heartbeat the air filled with a strange vibrating sound. Then the shield recovered, pushing him back. The soldiers cheered for Talra, thinking she had won again, but inside her armor, Talra felt a sting. A small alarm blinked near her chest panel. The last hit had done something. She frowned, but she did not understand what. Ryan took a step back, breathing heavily. The magnetic pulse had worked, just not completely. The armor was weaker now. He could feel it. One more strike in the same place might break it for real. Talra raised her weapon again, shouting in anger. "You think you can challenge a commander of the Zerath Dominion?" Ryan answered quietly, "I do not need to challenge you. I only need to prove that humans are not what you think we are." His words carried across the arena. The soldiers murmured again. None of them had ever heard a prisoner speak with such calm pride. The fight continued. Each movement became sharper, faster. Talra attacked with all her strength, her armor glowing red-hot. Ryan moved like a shadow, waiting for the exact rhythm he needed. Every step, every turn was a calculation. At last, she lifted her axe high for one final strike. Ryan saw the pulse of her shield drop for an instant. That was the opening he had waited for. He lunged forward with all the strength he had left and drove his blade into the same weak point, the joint near her chest plate. This time, the magnetic pulse spread deep into the armor. A loud crack echoed through the air. Sparks flew from her shoulder as the shield broke apart. The crowd gasped. For the first time in her life, Talra felt the air on her skin through a gap in her armor. She stumbled backward, her weapon falling from her hand. The armor around her chest was cracked and smoking. Her power cells blinked rapidly, struggling to keep up. Ryan stood in front of her, holding his weapon low. His breathing was heavy, his face covered in dust, but his eyes were steady. Talra looked down at him, disbelief clear in her voice. "How?" she whispered. "How did a human break Zerath armor?" Ryan replied softly, "You rely on strength. I rely on understanding." The Zerath soldiers were silent. None of them could believe what they had seen. Their commander, who had defeated every opponent she ever faced, had been struck down by a human with a weapon smaller than her arm. Talra dropped to one knee. The ground shook slightly as her armor powered down. She looked at the small blade still glowing faintly in Ryan's hand. He spoke again, his tone calm. "Your armor is perfect against power, but it cannot stop what it cannot predict. Every system has a flaw. I just needed to find yours." The wind swept across the arena, carrying red dust into the sky. The moment felt longer than it was. Finally, Talra stood up again. She deactivated what was left of her shield and looked at Ryan without anger. There was something else in her eyes now, a kind of respect that she had never shown before. "You fought with skill," she said. "You are not like the others we have captured." Ryan bowed slightly. "I only used what I had." Talra turned to her soldiers. They stood frozen, unsure what to do. She raised one hand and said, "The fight is over. This human has earned victory." Her soldiers looked at one another in confusion. They had never heard their commander say such words to an enemy. But none of them dared to speak against her. Ryan lowered his weapon. The energy inside it faded until the blade became a simple piece of metal again. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. To him, the fight had never been about pride or glory. It was about proving that humanity's mind was its greatest strength. Talra walked toward him slowly. She looked down at the weapon in his hand and said, "That device of yours, it is unlike any I have seen. What do you call it?" Ryan thought for a moment and then answered, "It is just a tool." "A human tool?" Talra nodded. "Then it is a dangerous one." She turned to leave, but before she walked away completely, she said, "You have my respect, Ryan of Earth. Remember this day. It will be spoken of among the stars." As she left the arena, the Zerath soldiers silently moved aside. None of them dared to meet her eyes. They all knew that something had changed. The Dominion's pride had taken its first crack. Ryan stood alone in the center of the courtyard. The red dust slowly settled around him. He looked down at the blade in his hand. It no longer hummed. It was silent now, but he knew it had done what it was meant to do. The other human prisoners stared in awe. For the first time since their capture, hope flickered in their eyes. Ryan had shown them that they were not helpless, that even the smallest invention could stand against the strongest empire. Far above, the twin suns of Velkar Prime shone through the dust-filled sky. Ryan raised his head toward them. He did not know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain: the Zerath would never look at humans the same way again. The news of the duel on Velkar Prime spread quickly through the Zerath Dominion. Stories traveled faster than light among the soldiers and workers stationed across their colonies. A human had broken the armor of Commander Talra. Many refused to believe it. Others whispered that the human had used forbidden tricks. But those who had stood in the courtyard knew the truth. They had seen the crack in the armor, and the calm look on the man's face when it happened. The next morning, Ryan woke inside a small tent outside the fortress. His hands were bound not by chains but by a light security field. He was still a prisoner, but something had changed in how the Zerath treated him. The guards did not shout anymore. They brought him food and water in silence. When he asked questions, they even answered. Ryan ate slowly, thinking of what would come next. He had won a fight, but he was still on enemy ground. Yet deep inside, he felt that something important had begun. Outside the tent, 2 Zerath soldiers stood watch. One of them, a younger guard named Kor, kept glancing at Ryan. Finally, he spoke. "Is it true," he asked, "that your weapon is made from scrap parts?" Ryan looked up. "Yes, every piece I used came from broken machines." Kor hesitated before asking again. "And you defeated the commander with that?" "I used her strength against her," Ryan said. "Every design has a limit. Even armor that looks perfect can fail if you understand it well enough." The other guard, an older one, muttered, "That is human talk. Always trying to find weakness in what is strong." Ryan smiled a little. "It is not weakness. It is study. We build things to understand them. Sometimes we take them apart to make them better." Neither guard replied, but when they left, they looked at him differently than before. Later that day, Talra called for him. The soldiers brought Ryan into the main hall of the fortress. The walls were covered in banners showing Zerath victories. The air smelled of oil and metal. Talra stood near a wide table filled with holographic maps. Her armor had been repaired, but the new plating over her chest still showed a faint scar where the magnetic pulse had struck. When she saw him, she nodded. "You fight with skill and thought. Few in this empire can say the same." "I want to understand what you did." Ryan bowed slightly. "You already understand, Commander. I only used what I had and what I saw." Talra walked closer. "Your weapon was simple, yet it defeated a design made by our best engineers. How is that possible?" Ryan answered, "Because your engineers believe power solves everything. But power without study is waste. You build armor that blocks everything. I built a weapon that only needs one small opening. Talra looked at him for a long time. You speak boldly for a prisoner. I speak clearly, he said. You saw what happened. The armor failed because it was never meant to face someone who thinks differently. For a while, the room stayed silent except for the hum of the holographic screens. Finally, Talra said, You are no ordinary human. I will not have you return to the mines. You will stay here under my supervision. Ryan nodded. If that is your wish, she motioned to a technician. Bring the human's weapon. The magnetic blade was placed on the table. Talra studied it carefully. She tried to activate it, but it stayed silent. Ryan explained, It is locked to my heartbeat. It listens for a rhythm. Without that rhythm, it stays asleep. Talra looked surprised. You built it to know you? Yes, machines should know their maker, Ryan said softly. That way, they do not betray the wrong hands. That answer impressed her. She dismissed the guards and said, Tell me, human, what drives your kind to build like this? You live shorter lives than us, you are smaller, weaker, and yet you create with more hunger than most races. Ryan looked down at his hands. Because we have to. Our world is not as strong as others. We survive by making things that help us. We learn by failing, by breaking, by rebuilding. Talra listened quietly. For the first time, she began to see humanity not as weak but as restless, clever, and persistent. After their talk, Ryan was given a small workspace near the fortress courtyard. Talra said she wanted to see if he could repair damaged Zerath drones. Ryan agreed. It gave him a chance to study their machines. Days passed. Ryan worked carefully, taking apart one drone after another. He noticed how their circuits were built for power but not for endurance. The designs were beautiful but lacked adaptability. When the environment changed, the machines often failed. He wrote notes on a small pad the Zerath gave him. Sometimes Kor, the younger guard, came to watch. He was curious about everything Ryan did. Why do you keep writing? Kor asked once. Ryan replied, Because memory fades but records stay. Writing is another kind of weapon. Kor did not understand at first, but he respected the answer. One evening, while Ryan worked under the dim light of the fortress lamps, Talra entered again. She watched silently for a few minutes before speaking. Your people could be valuable to the Dominion, she said. If you shared your methods, we could build stronger machines together. Ryan stopped working. Sharing is not the same as serving. My people would not build for war. Talra frowned. Every empire must fight to survive. Maybe, Ryan said, but there are other ways to be strong. Her eyes narrowed. You speak as if you know more about strength than we do. Ryan turned to face her. You have power, Commander. But power without purpose is only noise. What do you fight for? The question surprised her. She had always fought because it was her duty, because the Dominion demanded it. She opened her mouth to answer but found no words. Before she could reply, an officer entered the hall. Commander, he said quickly, a message from the capital. High Command demands a report on the human duel. Talra took the message, read it, and dismissed the officer. When he left, she sighed. They think I have brought shame to the Dominion. They demand that I prove my strength again. Ryan looked calm. Then they did not learn anything from what happened. Talra gave him a long look. You speak as if you are my advisor now. I speak as someone who saw truth in that courtyard, Ryan said. You were not weak that day. You learned. Her expression softened for a moment, but then she turned away. Learning is not what the Dominion rewards. They reward victory. After she left, Ryan returned to his work. He knew what that meant. The Dominion would not let the story end with a human victory. They would want another test, another fight to restore their pride. A week later, the new order arrived. A ship descended from the sky carrying another Zerath commander named Vorn. He was taller than Talra and wore heavier armor. His voice was deep and proud. He walked through the fortress like he already owned it. When he saw Ryan, he laughed. So this is the small human who wounded our pride. You must be very proud of yourself, Ryan answered quietly. Pride was never my goal. Vorn smirked. Then you will have no problem losing it. He turned to Talra. High Command has sent me to correct your mistake. I will face this human myself. Talra clenched her fists. That is not needed. The duel proved its point, but Vorn ignored her. It proved only that you were careless. I will end this mockery. Ryan could see anger in Talra's eyes, not at him but at her fellow commander. She looked at Ryan and said softly, Do not accept. You have already won what matters. Ryan shook his head. If I refuse, they will say humans are afraid. If I fight, maybe they will listen. Talra studied him for a moment. Then I will not stop you. But be careful, Vorn is not like me. He does not respect limits. The next day the soldiers gathered again in the courtyard. The sky above Velkar Prime burned red. Vorn stood in full armor, his weapon a long spear that crackled with blue lightning. Ryan faced him with his repaired magnetic blade. Before the duel began, Talra walked up to Rian and whispered, "You do not fight alone today. Every Zerath here is watching. Show them why your kind is different." Ryan nodded. The crowd fell silent. The signal to begin sounded. Vorn charged immediately, his spear cutting through the air. The energy field around it made the ground spark. Ryan dodged the first strike, feeling the heat pass close to his face. He countered with a quick swing, but Vorn's armor deflected it easily. "You are slower than I expected," Vorn said with a grin. Ryan moved back, studying him. The armor was thicker than Talra's and used an older power core that pulsed unevenly. It was built for strength, not for balance. That was the key. The duel continued, fast and brutal. Vorn attacked again and again, confident that no human could stand against him for long. Ryan used the same tactic as before: patience. He waited, observed, and saved his energy. At one point, Vorn lifted his spear to deliver a heavy strike. His chest plate shifted, exposing a small vent for cooling. Ryan saw it and moved. He jumped forward, thrusting his blade into the opening. A sharp pulse filled the air. The armor exploded with a burst of smoke and light. Vorn was thrown back several steps, his shield collapsing completely. The soldiers gasped. For the second time, a human had broken the unbreakable. Talra stepped forward, pride shining in her eyes. Vorn struggled to stand, but his armor sparked and failed. He glared at Rian and shouted, "You tricked me." Ryan replied calmly, "No, I only saw what you did not." The courtyard fell silent again. Talra looked at the human and then at her soldiers. "Remember this day," she said. "Remember that strength alone is not enough. The galaxy will change because of what you saw here." The Zerath soldiers bowed their heads. None dared to mock now. The arena that once roared with laughter now stood in silence. The Zerath soldiers looked down from the high platforms, their faces hidden behind shining helmets, unable to understand what they had just seen. Commander Talra, the strongest warrior of their ranks, was kneeling on one knee. Her armor cracked open in several places. The glow that once made her look unbeatable had faded. The air smelled of metal and burned circuits. Ryan stood a few steps away, breathing hard but calm. His small magnetic blade hummed softly in his hand. It was not glowing or covered in sparks. It looked like a simple tool, yet every soldier in the arena knew it had done what no weapon in the galaxy had done before. It had broken the Zerath armor. The sound of the wind echoed through the open dome. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Talra slowly lifted her head. Her sharp eyes met Ryan's steady gaze. She did not speak at first, and neither did he. Her pride had taken a wound far deeper than her armor. She was a commander trained from youth to believe her people were the strongest in the stars. Now that belief stood shattered before her. When she tried to rise, her armor gave a faint crack. Ryan stepped closer and offered his hand. She hesitated. The idea that a human could offer help to a Zerath warrior was something she could never imagine before. But she took his hand. His grip was firm and steady, and he helped her stand. The Zerath soldiers shifted uneasily. They had never seen such a sight. One of them whispered that the human must have used trickery. Another said that no machine from Earth could pierce Zerath energy fields. But deep inside, they all knew what had happened was real. Ryan had won with precision, not power. Talra looked down at her broken chest plate. "How did you do this?" she asked. Her voice was calm now, stripped of pride. Rian held up his weapon. "Every shield has a pattern," he said. "Every pattern has a point of weakness. You rely on strength, but I rely on study." Talra looked around at her soldiers. "You hear him?" she said softly. "He studied what we never cared to see." The Zerath soldiers lowered their heads slightly. It was a gesture of discomfort, not respect. But even that was more than they had ever given to a human. The grand overseer of the arena, a tall Zerath elder with silver armor, stepped forward. "Enough," he said. "The duel is complete. The human has proven his skill." His voice trembled with disbelief. This was not expected. Talra stood straight and faced him. "No, it was not. But it was deserved, she said. We laughed at him. We mocked his weapon. Yet he has shown us that knowledge defeats arrogance. The overseer gave a slow nod. Perhaps, he said. But rules are rules. The winner must be honored. He looked at Ryan. Human, you will be recorded as the first of your kind to defeat a Zerath commander in open combat. You may leave with respect. Ryan gave a small nod. He looked at Talra again. You fought well, he said. Talra gave a faint smile. You fought better. The arena lights dimmed as the crowd dispersed. The Zerath soldiers walked away in silence, their heads low. Ryan walked with 2 human guards who had been freed after the duel. They looked at him with pride and relief. One of them, a young man named Leon, whispered, You did it, Ryan. You made them see what humans can do. Ryan smiled faintly. They saw more than that. They saw what pride can destroy. Later that evening, Ryan was invited to the Zerath command hall. It was a massive structure built from polished metal and blue crystal. The hall had no decorations, only lines of data screens that showed battle reports and energy readings. Talra waited for him there, dressed in a simple uniform now without her armor. I wanted to speak to you again, she said. I have fought for 30 cycles. I believed power was the only truth. Today you broke that belief. Ryan looked around the hall. Beliefs are like shields. They can protect, but if they are too rigid, they break. Talra nodded slowly. I mocked you for carrying that small blade. I said it was nothing. Now I understand. You humans think differently. You fight differently. You adapt faster than we expect. Ryan set the blade on the table between them. This is not a weapon of destruction, he said. It is a tool. It works because I studied how your energy flows. I did not need strength, only timing. Talra touched the blade with her finger, careful not to activate it. You turned weakness into precision, she said quietly. Our kind could learn from that. Ryan looked at her. Learning is what makes any species grow. Arrogance stops that growth. Talra exhaled slowly. You speak as if you have seen pride destroy others before. Ryan nodded. Humans are not perfect. We have made mistakes too. But we learn from them. That is why we survive. For a while neither spoke. Outside the tall windows the stars shone over Velker Prime. The night was quiet, broken only by the hum of distant machines. Finally, Talra said, When I return to my command I will tell them what happened today. They will not believe me at first, but they will see the recording. They will see you standing where no human has ever stood. You will not be forgotten. I do not want fame, Ryan said. I only want peace between our kinds. Talra gave a small nod. Perhaps this duel will start something new. The next morning, the news spread across the Zerath Empire. Holoscreens replayed the moment when Ryan's strike shattered Talra's armor. Commentators debated how it was possible. Some claimed it was luck. Others called it skill beyond calculation. But on every planet, beings began to talk about humans in a new way. In the mining colonies where human workers lived under Zerath rule, people gathered around screens to watch. They cheered and cried. For the first time, they felt proud to be human in a galaxy that treated them as lesser. Even in the Zerath academies, young soldiers watched the footage in silence. One of them turned to his teacher and said, If a human can do this, what does that mean for us? The teacher answered, It means we are not as perfect as we thought. Days later, Talra met with her council. The high commanders asked her to explain the defeat. She stood before them without fear. It was not a defeat of strength, she said. It was a defeat of arrogance. We believed we could not be touched. We were wrong. One of the commanders shouted, You let a human humiliate us. Talra replied calmly. He did not humiliate us. He taught us. There was silence in the hall. The commander had no answer. When Ryan prepared to leave Velker Prime, Talra came to the spaceport. She handed him a small crystal chip. This contains the data of our armor system, she said. If you can improve it, do so. Let it be a sign that we can build together, not destroy each other. Ryan took the chip with respect. You trust me with this? I trust what I learned from you, she said. That trust is stronger than pride. Ryan smiled. Then maybe the galaxy still has hope. As his shuttle lifted off, he looked down at the arena where everything had begun. It was empty now, but its story would echo through the stars. The tale of a human who used knowledge to break pride would travel farther than any fleet. Talra watched the shuttle disappear into the sky. She stood silently, her hand over the crack in her repaired armor. It would always remind her of the day she learned what true strength meant. From that day forward, the Zerath stopped mocking human inventions. They began trading technology and studying human designs. They realized that power without understanding was fragile, and humans, once seen as weak, became respected allies across many worlds. But for Ryan, the victory was never about fame or recognition. It was about changing a belief that had divided two species for too long. His one precise strike had not only broken armor but opened minds. And somewhere in the endless space between stars, both human and Zerath ships began flying together, not as enemies, but as partners learning from each other. The pride that once blinded them had been broken. In its place, respect had grown, and from respect a new future was born. The sun rose slowly over the silver skies of Velkar Prime. The great arena that once echoed with laughter and arrogance now stood quiet. Birds flew over its open dome, their wings catching the light that poured through the clouds. To many, it was just a battlefield of pride and loss, but to others it had become a symbol of something greater. It was where a single human had changed the course of two worlds. Ryan stood near his ship, preparing for departure. His small blade rested safely in a sealed case. It was no longer just a weapon. It had become a part of history. Talra stood beside him, wearing a new armor design that blended human materials with Zerath technology. It was lighter and more flexible, proof that both species could learn from each other. "You're leaving today," she said quietly. Rian nodded. "Yes. I need to return to Earth. My people must know what happened here." Talra looked toward the horizon. "Your people will be proud. You did something no one thought possible. You changed how we see humans." Ryan smiled softly. "It was not about pride or revenge. I only wanted understanding." She turned to him. "You gained more than that. You gained respect from those who once saw you as nothing." Ryan's ship lifted its boarding ramp. The two stood in silence for a moment longer. Then Talra said, "The Council has agreed to open a trade path between Earth and the Zerath colonies. You will be remembered as the bridge between our kinds." Rian looked at her with calm eyes. Then the strike was worth it. When the ship rose through the thin blue clouds, Talra stayed there, watching until it vanished from sight. She felt something she had never known before, admiration for a human. Weeks later, Rian arrived on Earth. The planet looked peaceful compared to the cold metal cities of the Zerath. Green forests covered the mountains and oceans shimmered like mirrors under the sun. Yet the people of Earth were restless. News of the duel had reached them long before Ryan did. Everywhere he went, people spoke his name. At the spaceport, a large crowd waited. They held banners that said humanity is not weak and the mind is mightier than metal. Reporters rushed forward with cameras. One of them asked, "Ryan, is it true you defeated the Zerath commander with only one strike?" He smiled humbly. "It was not just a strike. It was understanding." The reporter pressed again. "What do you mean by that?" Ryan answered, "Strength fades, but knowledge grows. We humans have always survived by learning. That is our real weapon." The crowd cheered. For the first time in many years, humans felt proud not because of war, but because of intelligence and courage. That evening, Rian stood before the Earth Council. The hall was filled with leaders, scientists, and soldiers. Behind him stood a large display showing the footage of his duel with Talra. The moment the blade struck her armor, the audience fell silent. A senior counselor stood and said, "Ryan, you have done more for humanity than any general or politician. You showed that our people cannot be ruled by fear or arrogance." Rian shook his head. "I did not fight for fame or titles. I fought because no one should mock another for their size or their tool. Every mind has power." The counselor smiled. "Then what do you wish for now?" Ryan looked around the chamber. "I wish to share what I have learned. Not just with humans, but with the Zerath. We must build together, not fight again." His words were simple, but they touched everyone. The council voted to begin an alliance with the Zerath Dominion. They named it the Accord of Precision in honor of Ryan's perfect strike. Months passed. Trade ships began to travel between Earth and the Zerath colonies. Engineers worked side by side, sharing blueprints and ideas. The Zerath taught humans about energy crystals, while humans shared their designs for magnetic engines and flexible alloys. Talra became the official Zerath envoy to Earth. When she arrived, she was greeted with respect. She wore her repaired armor but carried no weapon. "Peace is my armor now," she said to the crowd. Rian met her at the docking bay. "It feels strange to see you here on Earth," he said. Talra smiled faintly. "It feels strange to walk among humans and not be feared." They walked together through the research facility where human and Zirath scientists worked side by side. On one table lay the small magnetic blade now taken apart for study. A young human engineer said, "Sir, we have analyzed your weapon. Its design is simple yet perfect. It uses less energy than any blade we have seen." Rian nodded. "It was built for balance, not for destruction." Talra added, "And it reminds us that true strength comes from focus." Later, they sat in the observatory, watching the night sky. Stars sparkled across the dark sky like silver dust. Rian pointed to one bright cluster. "That is the route to the Zarath capital," he said. "Now it is open to all." Talra nodded. "When I was young, I was taught to see humans as weak. Now I tell my people that humans are builders of wonders. Your world may look small, but your hearts are vast." Rian smiled. "And your people taught me that even the strongest can learn humility." We have both changed. For a long while, they said nothing, just watching the stars. The universe felt larger and calmer now, as if one act of understanding had softened its edges. As years passed, the story of Rian and Talra became legend. Children on both Earth and Zirath worlds studied it in schools. Teachers told them about how a single act of respect could change the fate of many. Statues were built in their honor, not of battle but of peace. The statue on Earth showed Rian handing his blade to Talra, symbolizing the sharing of knowledge. The statue on Velkar Prime showed both standing together under the same star, their shadows touching. The alliance grew stronger each year. New cities rose on planets that once saw war. Mixed crews of humans and Zirath explored uncharted systems together. One such ship, named Unity's Edge, was commanded by a young Zirath pilot and a human engineer. They often spoke of the old duel. The pilot said, "Our ancestors fought in that arena. Now we traveled together." The engineer replied, "Because one human believed in understanding." Rian, now older, lived in a quiet home near the sea. He spent his days building small machines for children to learn from. He never cared for wealth or medals. He preferred the sound of the waves and the laughter of young minds learning to create. One afternoon, Talra visited him again. She had aged too, her silver hair tied behind her armor collar. She carried a small case and placed it on his table. "What is this?" Rian asked. Talra opened it. Inside was a replica of his magnetic blade, polished and engraved with words in both human and Zirath languages. The words read, "Precision is the bridge between minds." She said, "The High Council asked me to give you this. It is a gift from both our worlds." Rian looked at the blade with quiet pride. "It feels strange to see my simple tool turned into a symbol." Talra smiled. "Simple tools change great empires. You taught us that." They stood by the window watching the sun sink into the ocean. The waves rolled gently, glowing gold under the light. Rian said softly, "When I first built that blade, I just wanted something small that could work with what I had. I never thought it would travel across stars. And I never thought I would learn from the one I once mocked," Talra replied. "But life is full of surprises," Rian nodded. "That is what makes it worth living." When Rian passed away years later, both humans and Zirath mourned. Across many planets, ships dimmed their lights for one full cycle. Talra gave the eulogy, her voice strong but gentle. "Rian was not a warrior in the way we understood," she said. "He did not fight with rage or pride. He fought with purpose. His single strike broke more than armor. It broke the walls between our hearts." The crowd remained silent as she placed the blade replica on his memorial stone. From that day forward, the alliance between humans and Zirath was known as the Legacy of Precision. Every academy, every military school, and every research center carried a plaque with Rian's words. Every tool has power when guided by the right mind. Generations passed, but the lesson endured. Children from both species grew up hearing the story and understanding its meaning. The galaxy became a little wiser, a little kinder, and somewhere among the stars where silence and light meet, the memory of one human and one Zirath commander continued to shine. A reminder that greatness does not come from pride or power, but from the courage to learn, the will to understand, and the strength to strike only when it truly matters. The legacy of one precise strike lived forever, carried not by weapons but by the hearts of those who remembered what it meant to be truly strong.